Again with this coffee, Talia. Grant's voice came from behind me, just as I opened the grinder lid. The beans were already hissing in the machine, releasing that familiar bittersweet scent. I froze with the scoop in my hand. He leaned over my shoulder, sniffed slightly, and said, "Didn't I tell you? The one in the red bag is better. This one's too acidic." I didn't answer right away. Instead, I poured the grounds into the French press slowly, watching the dark powder settle at the bottom like silt in a riverbed. "I like this one," I said quietly without turning around. "It's what I prefer." He sighed, pulled a mug from the drying rack, held it up to the light, inspecting it like it was some relic. "We really need to toss these soon. Look at the base, it's already stained." That mug had been a gift from my mom when I first moved into this apartment. I had forgotten it was even stained. Grant was 35, medium build, perfectly trimmed dark hair, always dressed like he was about to walk into a meeting, even on Sundays. I used to think he looked handsome. Now he just looked precise, predictable. "It's just a coffee mug," I muttered, stirring in sugar, feeling the spoon clink against ceramic. But the irritation simmered under my ribs. The smallest things always became discussions, arguments disguised as helpful advice. 2 years ago, I would have smiled. Back then, we were in a conference room of a boutique agency downtown. I was fumbling with the espresso machine when he came up beside me, smiled like a movie character, and said, "Allow me to make coffee for the most beautiful woman in this building." It was charming, sincere. He even brought me that red bag coffee the next week, claimed it was life-changing. And maybe it was. Maybe that one bag of beans shifted something inside me, nudged me toward the idea that this man could take care of me, that he noticed things, that he'd always pay attention. But now it felt less like attention and more like surveillance. "Breakfast?" I asked. "Yes, please," he said, setting down his phone. "Just don't use the olive oil from last night. It smelled a little off." I retrieved a fresh bottle from the cupboard, then cracked 2 eggs into the pan, watching the whites slowly take shape. Grant hovered beside me again. "Careful with the yolks. You always overcook them. I like them runny, remember?" I gritted my teeth. I know. The kitchen filled with silence, the kind that isn't peaceful but heavy. Grant scrolled through the news on his phone, occasionally grunting at headlines. I stared at the window above the sink. The trees outside were bare, branches swaying against a slate-gray sky. Winter was close, and so was the wedding. 6 months ago, when we stood in line at the courthouse to file for our marriage license, I remember Grant whispering, "Soon you'll officially be mine." He said it like a promise, like it was something I should feel lucky to become. "I'm already yours," I had joked back then. "Not until you take my name," he replied. I'd laughed at the time. I wasn't laughing now, because lately it all felt like a slow signing away of myself. Page by page, clause by clause, without reading the fine print. "By the way," he said between bites of toast, "Mom invited us to dinner tonight. She says it's important." My stomach sank. Important. Probably wants to talk wedding plans. Or grandkids. She's been on about that lately. She's turning 62, you know. Wants to see some little feet running around. I burned my tongue on the coffee and didn't even flinch. Children. The word had started appearing more and more, like background static slowly becoming a scream. "How do you feel about that?" I asked. He shrugged. "It's time, right? We're the right age. We've got jobs. We'll get a house soon. Makes sense. A child. Not a dream. Not a desire. Just the next step on the checklist. Maybe we could travel first," I suggested. "Do something spontaneous." Grant raised an eyebrow. "With what money, Talia? We've got a wedding to finish paying for. Then we start looking at mortgage options. This is the real world. We're not 22 anymore." My heart beat harder than it should have. Not because he was wrong, but because I couldn't remember the last time I felt right. Judith Alden opened the door with the kind of enthusiasm that always felt forced. My darlings, she beamed, lipstick smudged slightly on her teeth. Come in, come in. I made roast chicken and that butternut squash soup Grant loves. Her voice was loud, full of uninvited affection, as if volume equaled warmth. I stepped inside, inhaling the scent of sage and garlic, and immediately felt like a guest in a life someone else had chosen for me. Grant's father, Ned, nodded politely from the recliner, holding a glass of tea and wearing the same quiet patience he always wore around his wife. I liked him, though he barely spoke. He had kind eyes. The living room was crammed with heavy floral furniture, outdated doilies, and a sense that everything in it had been purchased with coupons and stubborn pride. Judith was already dishing out food before we sat. Eat while it's hot, she said, piling my plate high. You need to keep your strength up. Her tone dropped just slightly on that last part, and I knew what was coming. So, she said casually, settling into her chair, when are we going to start planning for grandkids? I glanced up from my fork. We haven't really talked specifics yet. Nonsense, she waved her hand. You two are perfect candidates. Talia, you're what? 32 now. And Grant's 35? It's time. No sense waiting around until your hips start creaking. Grant chuckled lightly. Mom, don't mom me, she said, jabbing her finger in the air. You were asking for a baby brother when you were 6. I've waited long enough. Besides, it's not like you don't have a plan. You always have a plan. She looked at me with a smirk. Grant's always been good at seeing the big picture. I put down my fork. Maybe we could start with 1 and see how it goes. 1, she laughed. You'll change your mind. Once you hold that first one, you'll want a whole basketball team. Ned, still sipping his tea, looked at his wife. Maybe we should let them decide on their own, We didn't have Grant right away either. Times were different, Judith shot back. Now people wait too long and miss their chance. It's not good for the children or the marriage. I caught a small wink from Ned as he looked at me across the table. There's no rush, he said, so softly Judith almost didn't hear. But I did, and something inside me cracked open just a little. As the meal continued, the topic shifted, as it always did, to our living situation. Judith leaned in. So have you two found anything better yet? I mean, I know Talia's apartment is cozy, but it's hardly a place to raise kids. We're looking, Grant said smoothly. We've got a few mortgage appointments lined up. Good, she nodded firmly. You need space. A real loma, not just a starter box. I wanted to speak up, to say that I liked my apartment, that it was filled with books and light and memories, but instead I just sipped my water. Judith turned to me with a syrupy smile. Don't take this the wrong way, honey, but that little 1-bedroom of yours? It's cute for a single girl. You're about to be a wife, a mother. That place is a phase, not a future. It's my home, I said quietly. My grandmother left it to me. And that was generous, she replied without missing a beat. But legacies can be stepping stones, not destinations. I felt Grant squeeze my knee under the table. I don't know if it was meant as comfort or pressure. When we got in the car to head home, the silence was thick. Grant tapped the steering wheel like he always did when he was processing. Then, casually, you were quiet tonight. Didn't feel like competing, I said. He laughed a little too loudly. You're reading into things again. I looked out the window, watching headlights streak past in the dark. Are we making all these decisions together, Grant? Or are you just assuming I'm on board? Talia, he said with a sigh, I'm not assuming. I just know what's best. For both of us. I nodded slowly, my throat tight, and for the first time I wondered what would happen if I said, I don't want this. It was a Tuesday afternoon when the call came in. I was at my desk, halfway through translating a 20-page contract from German, when my cell phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, figuring it was another spam call, but something made me pick it up. Hi, is this Talia Mercer? A deep, polished voice asked. This is Holden Graves from Concordia Consulting. We came across your resume through one of our language agency partners. Are you currently open to new opportunities? I blinked. Excuse me. We're looking for a senior translator for our European client portfolio. High-level negotiations, international contracts, frequent travel. Munich, Paris, sometimes Amsterdam. Great salary. Fast-paced. You were highly recommended. I sat back in my chair, heart suddenly thumping. Can I ask how soon you're looking to fill the role? Immediately. If you're interested, I'd love to meet with you this week. We move fast, Talia. The position requires flexibility and initiative. I murmured something about needing time to consider and ended the call with trembling fingers. The rest of the day passed in a blur. The screen in front of me became a wash of grays and lines. That night, I didn't tell Grant. Not right away. I needed to let it breathe inside me. I needed to feel the possibility without having it crushed before I'd even spoken the words. The next evening, as we were finishing dinner, I finally said it. I had a call yesterday, I said, pushing peas around my plate. A job offer. With a company in Chicago. International consulting. They want me to handle their European clients. Grant barely looked up. Oh yeah? How'd they find you? Through the agency. They saw my profile, reached out. It's a real opportunity. Better pay. Travel. He chewed his bite slowly, then set down his fork. And I told them I'd think about it. They want to meet. You didn't tell them no? Not yet. I wanted to talk to you first. That was a lie, but I said it anyway. Grant leaned back in his chair and gave me that look, the one that meant he was about to teach me something. Talia, we have a wedding in 3 weeks. We're looking at houses. My mom already booked the venue. You really think now's the time to be flying off to Germany? It wouldn't be forever, I said quickly. Just 1 or 2 trips a month. I could try it out. He scoffed. Try it out? What is this, a cooking class? We're building a life here. Together. Not chasing some pipe dream around Europe. I felt my hands clench under the table. It's not a pipe dream. It's the job I've wanted since college. And what about the family we're supposed to be starting? You gonna zoom into our future from a hotel room in Frankfurt? I stared at him, stunned by the sarcasm. You're making it sound ridiculous. It's not. It is, he said flatly. It's unrealistic. Selfish, even. What happened to the plan, Talia? House, kids, normalcy? You want to throw all that away for a passport stamp. Later that night, I sat on the edge of our bed, staring at my reflection in the darkened window. My own voice echoed in my mind. What if you said yes? What if you took the meeting? What if this wasn't running away, but finally running toward something that was yours? I called my mom. It was late, but she answered on the first ring. Hi, sweetheart. Everything okay? I hesitated. I got a job offer, a big one. International. Lots of travel. There was a beat of silence. And how do you feel? Excited. Terrified. And what does Grant think? I didn't answer. She exhaled slowly. Talia, you've always been the brave one. The one who dreamed in more than 2 dimensions. If this job scares you a little, it's probably the right one. I hung up and looked at the ceiling for a long time. Maybe this wasn't about breaking anything apart. Maybe it was about finally building something that looked like me. The following morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls and 1 voicemail from Marlene. Her voice was chipper and commanding all at once. Talia, darling, I found the perfect venue for your rehearsal dinner. And I scheduled a fitting for you at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Bridal Elegance on Main Street. Ask for Deanna. Oh, and no need to worry about shoes. I'll take care of those. She didn't ask if I had time, or if I liked the place, or if I'd even agreed to wear the dress she picked out last week. That week became a blur of appointments I never made. Cake tastings for flavors I didn't like. Table settings in shades of beige I'd never choose. Grant kept saying, "It's just easier to let her do her thing. My mom's been dreaming of this longer than we have." And every time I tried to raise a suggestion, like having a smaller reception or skipping the choreographed first dance, I was met with a version of the same line. "Talia, come on. You don't want to disappoint everyone, do you?" No one asked what I wanted. They just assumed I wanted what they did. 2 weeks before the wedding, we went to the courthouse to finalize our documents. While we waited in line, a young couple stood in front of us, maybe mid-20s, laughing and whispering like high school sweethearts. The girl turned around and said, "You guys getting married too?" I nodded. She grinned. "We've been together 3 years. Finally decided to make it official." 2 years for us, Grant said proudly. "Feels like the right time." "Do you live together already?" she asked me. "Yeah, 8 months now." She beamed. "That's great. We can't wait to move in together. Breakfasts in pajamas, movie nights. It's going to be amazing." I smiled politely but felt a pang, jealousy maybe, or regret. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt that kind of unfiltered joy. Not since we started planning. Not since everything became a list of deliverables. When it was our turn, the clerk asked, "Will you be changing your last name, Ms. Mercer?" Before I could answer, Grant spoke up. "Of course she will. She's going to be a Campbell." The woman looked at me over her glasses. I need the bride to answer. I forced a smile. "Yes, I'll change it." Afterward, Grant looked confused when I didn't hold his hand in the parking lot. "What's wrong?" he asked. "It's just a name, Talia." But it wasn't. It was the first page of a new chapter written by someone else. At the next wedding meeting, Judith brought in a clipboard with a full itinerary. Ceremony starts at 4, then cocktail hour, then dinner. I spoke with the DJ. He'll play Endless Love for your first dance. "I don't really dance," I said. "Grant doesn't either." "Nonsense," she snapped. "Everyone dances on their wedding day. It's tradition." "Maybe we could just keep it simple." "Talia, sweetie," she cut in, "this is the biggest day of your life. You want it to be perfect." But I didn't want perfect. I wanted real. I wanted something that still felt like mine. Later that night, I sat on the couch flipping through the wedding binder Judith had assembled. It was thick with glossy pages, color swatches, and price tags. My name was on every page, but none of the choices were mine. Grant came in and sat beside me. "What are you thinking about?" he asked. "That couple at the courthouse," I said. "The way she talked about breakfast in pajamas." He smiled. "That's cute. Young love." "Is that not what we have?" I asked. He shrugged. "Ours is mature, stable, grounded. That's better, right?" He kissed my temple and turned on the TV, leaving me staring at the binder in my lap. I flipped to the page titled Vows. It was blank. The reception was winding down when I finally let myself step outside. My head was pounding from the laughter, the speeches, the endless clinking of glasses. Inside, people were still dancing, still drinking, still celebrating what they believed was the beginning of something beautiful. But for me, it felt like the end of something I couldn't quite name. I stood alone under the string lights outside the venue, holding a glass of champagne I hadn't touched. That was when it hit me. A few months ago, I'd walked into the hallway at Judith's house, just in time to hear her on the phone with one of her friends. "We finally found her," she had said. "The kind of girl who won't push back. Not too flashy, not too needy. Someone Grant can mold. Someone who'll fit in." I had laughed it off back then, telling myself she meant it kindly. But now, standing there in the dress she chose at the party she planned, I finally understood. I hadn't been chosen for who I was. I'd been selected for how easy I was to shape. My dress was beautiful, lace and satin, exactly what Judith had envisioned. Not me. The music shifted to something slow and sentimental. Through the glass doors, I could see Grant talking to his cousins, laughing, clapping one of them on the back like he'd just closed a business deal. I tried to remember the last time we had laughed like that. I couldn't. "You okay?" he asked, suddenly at my side. I nodded. "Just needed some air." He slipped his arm around me. "It's been a long day. Tomorrow we leave for Sedona. You'll finally get to relax." I smiled automatically. Sedona, the wellness retreat, the calm before responsibility week, as he called it. Meditation, massages, quiet trails. "Sounds peaceful," I murmured. "It will be. Just the two of us. No moms, no checklists." His voice was so warm, so certain, and I hated how much I wanted to believe him. That night, after he got back to the apartment, he fell asleep almost instantly. I lay beside him for nearly an hour, staring at the ceiling, still wearing my wedding ring, still in the silk slip Judith had insisted I pack for the wedding night. I listened to his breathing settle, the steady rhythm of a man content. I stared at the ceiling, heart pounding, trying to convince myself that this was just nerves, that I'd feel better in the morning. I whispered his name once, just to see if he'd stir. He didn't. His breathing remained slow, peaceful, like someone who had everything he wanted. And I realized I was the only one lying awake, wondering if this was a mistake. I had promised forever today, but I hadn't promised to disappear inside someone else's dream. And I knew then I couldn't do it. I slid out of bed, quietly, careful not to wake him. In the living room, the shadows stretched long across the floor. I picked up my phone and called the one person who might understand. My mom answered on the second ring. "Talia." Her voice was groggy. "Are you okay?" I didn't say anything at first. "Mom," I whispered, "what if I made a mistake?" Silence. Then her voice came soft and steady. "Then it's okay to correct it. But it's done. We're married." Sweetheart, being married isn't a prison. It's a partnership. And if only one person is choosing, that's not a marriage, it's a sentence. I closed my eyes, feeling the truth of her words slide into all the cracks inside me. I went to the bedroom, took off the ring, and set it gently on the nightstand. Then I opened the closet, pulled out my old canvas suitcase, and began to pack. Just enough clothes for a few weeks. My passport, a notebook, the book Ivy had given me before the engagement. I changed into jeans and a sweater, and for the first time in months, I looked like myself. I left a note. Nothing dramatic. Just, "I'm sorry. This isn't who I am." The building hallway was quiet as I wheeled my suitcase out. The elevator buzzed faintly as it descended. Outside, the air was cool against my face. My heart was racing, but my hands were steady. I walked past the streetlight where Grant had first told me he loved me, past the corner where we once kissed in the snow, past the future he'd planned down to the square foot. And when I reached the edge of the block, my phone buzzed. A message from Mom. "Where are you now?" I typed back, "I'm on my way home." Then I paused and added one more word. "Finally." 1 year later, I stood beneath a canopy of gold leaves on the Rue de Rivoli, my scarf tucked around my neck, a warm croissant in one hand and a folder of client documents in the other. The October air in Paris had a crispness I never experienced back home in Boulder. It smelled like roasted chestnuts, wet stone, and quiet freedom. I had just finished a meeting at Concordia's European office, a negotiation between a French logistics firm and a Dutch manufacturer, and my brain was still spinning from switching between 3 languages in 2 hours. But I felt alive, stretched, challenged, awake in ways I never was before. As I walked toward the cafe on the corner, my phone buzzed. It was my mom. I answered on the 3rd ring. "Hey," I said, breathing out a soft smile. "Talia," she beamed through the line. "How's Paris treating you?" "Like it knows I belong here," I said. "Tomorrow I head to London, then Amsterdam for the weekend." "You sound so light." "I feel it." The cafe was small, tucked between a bookshop and a flower stall. I took my usual table near the window, pulled out my journal, and began writing about the meeting, what worked, what didn't, how I felt when the CEO praised my ability to listen between the words. I had started this journal months ago, not just as a travelogue, but as a way to prove to myself that I wasn't just passing through life anymore, I was participating in it. A few minutes later, a man sat down at the table beside mine. Mid-30s, dark hair, glasses, a worn copy of Camus in his hands. He noticed me glance at the book and smiled. "Do you like French literature?" he asked in English, though with a soft Parisian lilt. I nodded. "Sometimes, when I can catch all the layers." "It takes practice," he said, "and a willingness to sit with discomfort." I laughed. "That sounds like life." "Touché," he said, raising his espresso. "Lucien," he added, extending a hand. "Talia," I replied, shaking it. We talked for 20 minutes. About books, music, languages. About the charm of getting lost in Montmartre. He was a literature professor at the Sorbonne. Passionate about teaching, soft-spoken, and startlingly perceptive. "So," he asked as he paid his bill, "are you in Paris for work or pleasure?" "Both," I said, "and maybe something else." He grinned. "And are you married?" It was a casual question, but it landed differently this time. I looked him in the eye and said, "No, I'm free." That evening, I took a long walk along the Seine. The city glowed in amber light, and everything felt open, possible. A year ago, I would have second-guessed that conversation, worried about appearances, loyalty, timing. Now, I just let myself be curious. Let myself feel things without immediately measuring their weight. Back at the hotel, I took off my coat, sat by the window, and opened my journal again. I wrote one sentence. There's no going back to the version of myself who thought silence meant peace. The next morning, as my taxi pulled away from the curb, I glanced at my phone. A text from Lucien. "Bon chance, a laundress. Let me know when you're back. Paris has more to show you." I smiled, slipped the phone into my coat pocket, and turned to watch the city fade behind me. I didn't know what would come next, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of not knowing. I was finally living the life I used to only imagine. Not the one someone had designed for me. Not the one that fit on a checklist or made others proud. This one was messy, thrilling, uncertain, and entirely mine. It was late one night in Amsterdam, rain tapping against the window pane, the room dim except for the golden glow of a reading lamp, when I found myself writing a letter I never planned to send. I hadn't thought about Grant in weeks, not consciously, but that night, after another client dinner and a quiet walk back to the hotel alone, something in me needed to lay the past down in words. I opened my journal to a blank page and simply wrote, "Dear Grant," not to accuse, not to justify, just to understand. We both know I vanished. One day you were married and the next I was gone. I've imagined 100 versions of what you must have felt waking up to the ring on the nightstand and a silent apartment. Maybe you were angry. Maybe you were humiliated. Maybe you told your mother it was temporary, that I'd come to my senses. But I didn't, because something had already broken long before I walked out that door. I paused, then kept going. You didn't hit me. You didn't scream. You didn't lie or cheat or leave bruises. But you built a cage with kindness, with logic, with expectations so tight I couldn't breathe. You loved a version of me that was convenient, predictable, pliable, polite. I played along for a while because it was easier than confronting the quiet truth. You never really saw me. When I told you about the job in Chicago, you smiled like a parent indulging a child's fantasy. When I said I wanted to keep my name, you looked at me like I had failed a test. Every time I offered a piece of my dream, you held it like it was a mistake I was making and corrected it. And maybe I let you. Maybe I helped build the cage, one silent compromise at a time. But something shifted the day we signed those marriage papers. I looked at the blank space where my name used to be and I felt erased. I stopped to breathe. The room was utterly quiet, the kind of quiet you can only find far away from everything familiar. I don't hate you, Grant. In fact, I hope you're okay. I hope you're happy, truly happy, with someone who fits better. Someone who wants the life you want. and doesn't question it every night while staring at the ceiling. I'm not bitter anymore. I'm just grateful. Grateful that I listened to the voice inside me that had been whispering for years. Grateful that I left before I became a stranger to myself. Grateful that the version of love I have now, between myself and the world, between myself and possibility, is real. I signed the letter without a name, just an open space. Then I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and placed it in the bottom drawer of my suitcase. No stamp, no address, just closure. That night I slept without dreams. In the morning, I woke early and walked along the canal, the mist curling over the water like a breath. Tulips were beginning to bloom in the flower carts. A couple walked by with matching scarves, their laughter bouncing softly off the brick walls. And as I watched them, I didn't feel envy or loss. I felt stillness. Sometimes healing isn't loud. It's not a grand gesture or a dramatic finish. Sometimes it's a letter you never send, and a silence that no longer hurts. The first time I returned to Boulder, it was spring. The city hadn't changed much. Same red brick buildings, same scent of pine in the air, same mountains looming gently in the distance like quiet guardians. But I had changed, and I knew at the moment I stepped off the plane. I had come back to visit my mom, who had just recovered from knee surgery. She insisted she didn't need help, but when I offered to cook dinner for the week, she lit up like it was Christmas. We spent long afternoons talking, laughing, moving slowly through the routines that once felt ordinary but now felt precious. One morning, while chopping vegetables, she looked at me and said, "You walk differently now." I raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "You don't shrink. You take up space, like you've come back into your own skin." I smiled, wiping my hands on a towel. "I think I have." It wasn't a dramatic transformation. No makeovers, no movie montages. Just small things. I said no without guilt. I asked for quiet when I needed it. I stopped apologizing for wanting something different. And maybe most of all, I stopped narrating my life in someone else's voice. One evening, I passed by the street where Grant and I used to live. I didn't go down it, didn't linger or stare. I just noted it like a closed chapter, a place that held a version of me I no longer was. Later that week, I ran into Judith at the grocery store. She almost didn't recognize me at first. My hair was longer, I wore no makeup, just a light blue scarf and travel-worn boots. "Talia," she blinked. "You look different." "It's good to see you, Judith," I said gently. She hesitated, then cleared her throat. "Grant's remarried, you know. Last fall." I nodded. "I hope he's well." She looked surprised by my calm. "You're not upset?" I shook my head. "No, we weren't right for each other. And I think, deep down, we both knew it." She looked at me for a long moment. "I didn't understand back then," she said. "Why you left." I was angry, but now I think I get it. You needed something we didn't offer. I gave her a small, warm smile. That's okay. I needed to offer it to myself. When I flew back to Paris, I carried something new with me. Not souvenirs or regrets, but a sense of rootedness that had nothing to do with geography. I understood now that home isn't always a place. Sometimes it's the space you create inside yourself when you finally stop trying to earn your own worth. Lucien met me at the airport. He held a bouquet of wildflowers and a crooked grin. "Welcome back," he said, kissing my cheek. "How was Colorado?" "Exactly what I needed," I said. "And now?" he asked. I smiled, taking his hand. "Now I write the next chapter." As we walked toward the station, I glanced back once at the fading airport lights, thinking about all the women I had been. The quiet fiancée, the polite daughter-in-law, the woman who once whispered, maybe next time, to every opportunity that passed her by. Not anymore. I had learned the most important truth of all. You are not selfish for choosing yourself. You are not broken for walking away from a life that fits someone else's dream. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is start again.